Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Step Into the Pivot. We're so happy you're joining us again today. We have a very fun guest today, Ilana Morris. Ilana, welcome to the show.
Hi, Teresa. Hi, Dr. Evie. It's so good
Yeah,
to be here.
it's nice to have you. I'm excited for your conversation. So, Ilana is a very interesting because she's all operations based. So I don't know if you're good at operations, and I think I used to be better at operations than I am, but that's why we need people like Ilana. She does a lot of system strategy and stuff you may not have ever heard of, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So, Evie, I'm going to let you talk a little more about Ilana.
Hi, Ilana. Thank you so much for being here. Yes, I think the word that really describes you so well is organized. Ilana is very organized. And I first heard about you for a while through someone that we all know, and it's another wonderful guest of ours, but we'll use that as an Easter egg. Can you figure out which guest who was recorded on the podcast is the person who introduced us to Ilana? And I met with this wonderful person, and I met her before she knew you. Then I had some conversations with her one on one saying, I really need to, in order to elevate my business and my experiences, I need someone who could help me do these, systems things and organizational things. She didn't know you at the time. Then I had a conversation with her, fast forward a little bit. Oh, I think I found someone. I think this is it. Then fast forward, then it was like, oh my goodness, it's happening. Here she is in my life. My life is getting so much better just by virtue that this person is helping me. And then fast forward to today, this continues, and it's been really an amazing situation. So I knew about you from the perspective of someone essentially experiencing their own life pivot by virtue of knowing you and you being someone who helped them get organized. As I got to know you, I learned that I, as I expected, that you had a lot going on behind the scenes. So, under the surface of being able to be someone who holds space for somebody else and offers advice and guidance in terms of how to have, one's own ducks in a row, that there are a lot of things that you experienced and some very intense that that forced you to get your ducks in a row. So tell us about your journey and particularly the big pivot that we're going to highlight today and how that shaped you and your outlook on life and work.
Yeah. Well, thank you both again for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation. And like you said, I've had a few different pivots. I started my career in education as a teacher, and then I was very young. I went for my master's degree. It's not what I studied undergrad. And after just about a year working with kids, I was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer that led me to take time off and determine, I didn't want to go back to the classroom after my journey, which we'll be discussing a bit more. And that led me into learning and developing this love for operations and systems and data and using that to make decisions about, not just education, but about businesses and how to streamline things. And then I worked in education operations for about 10 years. And during COVID, which, we'll get to as kind of part of my second pivot, was which led me to opening my own business now as essentially a fractional COO and system strategist for solopreneurs and thought leaders.
What you're starting to talk about is something that's uh, really important for me to highlight. Um, there is no separation between what happens in our personal life and how that then sets us on this trajectory to change, rearrange our professional life. What's going on in our professional life is going to keep influencing our personal life. And one of the first sort of like taglines that I was thinking about when I was considering, how do I teach some of these concepts, was this, your personal growth and personal development is professional, and there is no segregating it, gating it and separating it. And so tell us a bit more about the whole, you know maybe we start going a little deeper with the cancer journey, if you're
Yeah.
okay with that. 25, I mean, that's really, really young.
Yeah, I think it was a really big struggle. Obviously, you don't think about that when you're 25. You don't think it's a possibility. We hear a lot, or at least at the time, this was about 15 years ago now, we heard a lot about young children having cancer and, the St. Jude's commercials or these other kind of stories about childhood cancer. And then like old people, right? Our grandparents, our maybe our friend's mom or whoever. I think it's a little more talked about now, but there wasn't really some sort of roadmap to follow, and it was extremely shocking. And even when I was going to doctors, I knew something was wrong. They Cancer was never mentioned. It was, we think it could be this thing, we think it could be that thing. We're gonna remove the mass regardless, but we think it's this, we think it's this. But cancer was never mentioned. So it was really a big shock, and it really changed my perspective on who and what matters in life. And it led me on this kind of self-discovery journey where uh, that led to my ultimate career and my ultimate decision to have a business, right? So without it, I wouldn't have had a lot of the experiences I've had or made decisions that I have.
And I really like that you talk about the journey, right? Because I talk about that a lot too. I think when you have something like that that happens, you do get on that journey and it makes you reevaluate some of the things that, what's important or what's happening like that. I mean, you were young though. You were in your mid 20s, right? A lot of your friends were out, having fun, and you're here in this cancer journey. Talk about what that was like for you at that time, because I think that's a very, you're right. You see the young kids and you see these older adults, and kind of that middle group gets missed for whatever reason, right? And it's a very transitional time in your life just in general.
Yeah, and even at the time, I was trying to find support groups, and the support groups were all the ones for women who had breast cancer were all, 40 or 50 somethings who had lived their lives, gotten married, had kids. They were, that's a very different life stage. So, what am I going to go to this support group and have to relate to these women about, right? And so, I think going back a little bit, I felt like a lot of people and a lot of my friends from college who lived in the same city as me in New York City, they wanted to show up in the hospital for you and they want to be there for you, but at that age, you don't know how to do that. And for me, it was about who showed up with for me kind of after that period because I was back and forth between living at my parents' house, living in my apartment, and a lot of my friends, they wanted to be dating. They wanted to be going out at night, doing things, going to bars, going dancing. But for me, I didn't want to do a lot of those normal things anymore because why am I going to a bar, a dark, crowded bar, and then getting stepped on, elbowed, it's impacting like my surgical site. I can't sit down. I've just gone through a lot. And so for me, that kind of led to a self-discovery journey where I took pottery classes at a studio across from my apartment. I My cousin helped me find a yoga for cancer class, and that led me to go through, like, led me to meet friends through that group and other young survivors, which helped a lot. And I went on a retreat with this great foundation doing incredible work with cancer survivors in California. And it led me to doing yoga more consistently, and it was very grounding for me at the time. And it still is very grounding for me and my nervous system in my day-to-day life. And I did a 200-hour yoga teacher training because I thought it would be fun. And I had all these other experiences outside of what I think a lot of normal 20 somethings would be doing, right?
Well, and the question I was going to ask you had to do with the support, right, that you got. You talked a little about that, how, your friends and all that. I mean, I think it's really hard sometimes to support others, and especially a 25-year-old. Like you said, you just don't know how to act sometimes. What do you think? Because this question comes up a lot, even for people my age. Or like, how do you support somebody like that? Like, I have a friend whose husband's going through it now, and I just make sure every couple of days I text her, "Do you need anything? I want you to know I'm thinking about you." Right? But they're trying to like, yeah, also have to give them the freedom to do it on their own. So, can you just maybe talk a little bit more about that support?
Sure. I mean, I think some people in those situations don't even know what they need. And sometimes just saying, "Do you need anything?" isn't really helpful because they don't know. And for me, showing up for me at that time meant, let's watch a movie. Let's go to the movies. Do you want to come to dinner with us? Do you want to get a snack? Like, what are you up for? Do you need help with things around the house? Do you want to go get tea? My best friend, who I actually moved up to Boston to be closer to, uh, she came with her now husband. They were dating at the time. She came to my parents' house and they picked me up and we went to see a live action Disney movie. And just the fact that they drove there from, New Jersey to come do something out of the house with me was enough. And I think sometimes people don't always know what they need, and we need to sometimes force the help onto them because we're very bad in American culture at asking for help. And people don't know how, like, just cooking a meal for someone and showing up with it and dropping it off is often enough. It says, "I'm thinking about you. This is a meal you can just heat up, freeze, whatever, have around the house for when it gets to be too much," right? And I think that's something that's been a little bit lost over the years.
Mm. Yeah, I'm thinking about what you were sharing with regards to first how difficult it was to diagnose what was going on. So then I'm imagining you going through that massive amount of stress. The not knowing and the fact that what that means from an hour by hour basis, and then you have to, get up and face the whole situation again. One day goes by, another day, a week, who knows, when you're like looking at the I don't know what's going on, when we're going to find out. Then we find out, then we have to address what's going on there. So I'm just thinking about all the cumulative stress that you were in. Then the actual, technical, mechanical side of it, you mentioned the bar situation and having to think about, can I physically do this? Because if I, maybe my emotions right now want to go and hang out like that, but my body, if I get elbowed like that, I'm going to have to deal with something that, the rest of my peers do not. So I have to consider that. When I think about this whole massive experience, I can imagine you feeling so tired from all the decisions you have to make. And then when somebody asks, like, how can I help? Like, I don't know. I have no idea, right? In some ways, we tend to freeze, and actually quite physically, and from a nervous system standpoint, we tend to freeze when we have this decision fatigue. And that happens for people when they are not facing something really, massive and life-threatening, let alone when they're in a situation like the one that you were in. So I love this example that you're giving us that's then so concrete that a person who is not in that position but wants to help can do. Offer something specific because then that helps the person unfreeze and then be like, I don't know, I don't need anything. It's okay. But then they say, how about a movie? Hmm. Something starts to thaw. And this is all reminding me of the conversation that I know you also want to have about the other pivot
Mhm.
regarding you falling into operations. Just thinking about the example I gave at the beginning in terms of how you help somebody with both, know
Mhm.
and love and respect, that's that's what was happening for them. You show up and you start essentially introducing some of these little ways of like, how can I help? How about a movie? How about a dinner, metaphorically speaking? And then that helps, somebody from an operational standpoint unlock, unfreeze. Does that metaphor work, or am I like butchering the whole thing
No, I
altogether?
think
Do you
it
feel like
works. I think it works, and I think we know that like fight or flight is real, but freeze is now being added. So fight, flight, or freeze, that's a really big tongue twister, but we know that those are the options, and I think this metaphor you're making of decision fatigue is something we see with especially solopreneurs and very small business owners when they're trying to scale is you're just constantly having to make decision after decision after decision, and you're very stuck in the day-to-day motion of the business, and you're not getting the time to zoom out and work on your business if you're stuck working in the business, right? So doing the emailing, the tasks, the whatever, and you're not able to take the time to say, okay, what is actually moving the needle in terms of sales, marketing, whatever it is you want to look at. And I think when I go into a business, I'm like, okay, what you think is the priority, tell me that. And then as we get to work, we're going to find out it's really actually something else you're going to need help with. And I can usually kind of tell those things just from having a few calls with the person of, oh, you're doing this manually, you're doing this manually. Like, what is your document storage system? Oh, you don't have one. Or, oh, it's different for every business owner, or maybe one of my clients had set up a project management tool but wasn't really using it because she was, dealing with her inbox, which was getting hundreds of emails a day, and dealing with marketing and posting on social media and doing public speaking, and all of those things are taking energy away from taking a step back and seeing what's actually working, right?
No, and I think you're totally true. I think business owners get caught in that working in the business instead of on the business. I mean, I think Evie and I had plenty of conversations about that personally. For us as so that's why it is so important. And I like how we put it, right? And it's true about life too, right? Sometimes you have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture to figure out what that looks like. And I think sometimes that's what the cancer journey does for us. Whether that's how we'd like that to happen or not is not always how we'd like that to happen, but that is the truth of what happens. You mentioned earlier a little bit about your yoga practice, right?
Mhm.
And some mental health treatment, maybe, that. How did that work into your healing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important part of any kind of I I think I think it's important to move our bodies and get ourselves aligned within, and I know that that's something Dr. Evie talks about and practices, but I think for me it was like feeling like okay, I can do something besides be poked and prodded and have like a reconnection to myself and my body. And in all of that, it was also helping me feel grounded and not overwhelmed and not anxious. And it was a way for me to connect also with other people in my community. I met friends through the yoga studio I went to. I met friends through the Yoga for Cancer community that, I was in touch with for a very long time. And for me, even before being diagnosed, I was having anxiety attacks. I was having a not great time at my school, and it's very stressful to be a first year teacher. And so I had already been seeking mental health treatment, and once I was diagnosed with cancer, it just the anxiety, the panic, it just ratcheted it up because you're like, what is happening? Like, I don't even know. I don't know which surgeon. I'm meeting with multiple surgeons. I don't know which one to choose. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, there's all this, you know, ambiguity around what your journey is going to look like and what it's going to mean. And um, your body kind of stops being yours and it's just there. And, all these medical professionals are, again, like looking at you, examining you. You're getting biopsies, you're getting scans, you're getting all these things. And so for me, the yoga at least was a place to kind of get away from that and feel at least a little bit calm and grounded. And yeah, it was really a really important part in general of my life, and it still is. I just joined another yoga studio over here in my neighborhood because I'm just like I could work for so long, right? It's this again, it's that it goes back to like when you're a business owner, it's so hard to just shut your brain off. And for me, I need something to prompt me to say, okay, I'm shutting the laptop, I'm done working. I'm gonna go do yoga. There's no coming back from yoga and reopening the laptop. Like my
Yeah.
work day is done, right? I've done the work I can do. Sometimes that's 4 hours, sometimes it's 8 hours, sometimes it's 10 hours, but the day is done when the laptop is shut, and then the rest of the time is mine.
Well, two things I was just going to say very quickly, and then Amy, you can. Number one, the yoga probably also made you feeling a little bit more in control of your body too,
Yeah,
right? Like
for
it
sure.
made you feel that way. And I was laughing as you were talking about shutting the laptop because that's what I do too. When I'm done at the end of my day, I restart it and it closes. And I do not like it is very rare for me to open it until the next morning because I agree with you. I have to just shut it and move on. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
unless there's like
yeah.
we call them like the little screen purchase and the big screen purchase. Like I'm of that generation where like we don't want to buy like plane tickets on our phones. I want to
Yeah.
buy it on the
Yeah.
laptop. Like that's
For
a
sure.
good, certain things like that. But again, I try to just separate because otherwise it just blends and there's no difference between your personal life and your work life, which is a path we've all chosen as or at least in this conversation as entrepreneurs. It's a very difficult distinction I see a lot of people struggle with.
Mm-hmm. I think this is interesting that you just brought up now the difference between the personal and the professional in the sense of like where am I allocating time and the need to end spending time in the professional setting and I go outside of the professional setting to go do something that will be labeled as personal, but then we're back in that conversation of like that is going to actually benefit my business. So
Mm-hmm.
there is no separation between the personal and the professional in terms of the two are talking. You are one experience, one being of energy, and you are then deciding where am I going to allocate time and resources and where am I physically going to be for how long. But both of them, your yoga time, in other words, is really good for your business. That's the case that I'm
Right,
making. And
right.
my yoga teacher says that the most difficult yoga pose is getting on the mat. And I love that the example you just gave us definitely proves that. Another way I feel, um, you know, we can talk about all this is that once you stop being in that acute addressing of a situation like the journey that you were on, then can you continue to tend to your health across all the different areas as if you were tending a garden and really then it becomes a regular consistent practice of the regularity of it is really what's going to have cumulative benefits. If you just neglect your health, that's you're going to notice that. But sometimes we think that we have to do these like massive endeavors and that it's going to be extremely time consuming, but it's more like a consistent yoga practice, a consistent way of dealing with mental health, well-being, that is going to have bigger benefits, like tending a garden. You're like picking weeds here and
Yeah.
there, pruning what needs to be, and you're in sync with the seasons. Does that
Yeah.
work for you when you're thinking about what you're doing, and what kind of advice could you give others from that perspective?
Yeah. I think for me, it's about, or, this blending of the personal and professional. You can't like take your brain out and like wash it and then come back to it. And this is now professional time, right? It's how the way I react to stimuli is affected by both the personal and the professional. And so, when coming into business from education, I think that was a really hard change in the sense that in the education sector, the stakes are really high considering I'm working with children under the age of, for me, I was mostly working with children between the ages of 5 and 10. And so we're talking about the stakes of a child getting on the wrong bus, a child being released to the wrong individual, uh, different situations like that, field trips, logistics, all of these things have real feasible impacts versus and so your cortisol levels are very high, right, in general, and it keeps us in this state of I have to get things done, I have to be a certain way to interact with the families, to interact with the teachers. This, I know the stakes are high of the kid getting on the wrong bus or not getting on the bus or whatever situation might arise, right? And so in business, it's a little slower. It's different. It's just different. And, to me, I have a friend who says, she was an ICU nurse and she is now a business owner. And she's like, there's no emergencies in business compared to these types of other fields, right? No one is going to die if an email doesn't get sent within 24 hours, right? And so the stakes are just different. And I think that's something I'm trying to get used to still, but I it it's scary. It's scary in business and having made this transition and learning to like trust my decision making in a different way and also to invest in kind of myself, my skills, growing my knowledge around business as a whole. Um, because it's different models, it's different technology, it's different business owners think differently. They want different deliverables. So I would say it's just all kind of given me the perspective I have. And yeah.
Well, you're so right about the trust, right? We have to trust ourselves. We have to do that. We have to have that trust in ourselves. It's so important. You talked about so many great points today. So we can't thank you enough. Do you have a final thought about how this pivot was a step forward? I think you probably have a lot of you have a lot
Yeah.
of things you talked about. But if you had to pick, right, for you, what's the biggest way that this cancer journey pivot was a step forward for you?
I think for me, it helped me find a career I'm passionate about. It showed me I want to work with purpose-driven individuals and organizations. I am extremely empathetic, and I think that is not valued enough in life and business. And I think because of what I've been through, it's helped me get clarity around who and what is truly important. And so everything else has to go around, fit around that, right? And
For sure.
not the other way around.
I love that. Yeah. Um, Ilana, so many great thoughts today. Thank you so much for being here. Evie, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
I'm so grateful you're well. You know,
Thank
I'm
you.
grateful for this conversation, and I'm really grateful that we get to have it because I'm grateful that you know, are taking great care of your health, and thank you for being so inspiring to our listeners to do the
Yeah.
same for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really
Thank you
beautiful.
guys for having me. And I know you do Cancer Awareness Month episodes. I know you talk
Yeah.
about overall mental health, well-being, and how those things play together.
Yeah, because people's pivots are all over the place. I mean, I think, and people have multiple pivots. We talk about that all the
Exactly.
time. There's not just one. So, thank you again for being here, Ilana. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We are truly grateful to have you as well as our listeners. And as we sign off for this week, please remember that if you have a pivot, step into it.